So this year in Houston was a phenomenal year. Having the opportunity to lead this trip was great. It was a great honor. Our whole team really did a great job. I was really impressed with each individual who went on this trip, and it was cool to see how God used each individual throughout this trip.
We didn't go there for like a specific project. We just kind of went there and saw what they did like on a regular basis. We like had training during the day and then we went out, saw what they did at night.
It was a fun experience for me. I had never done anything like it before. When we went out and made disciples, we met some new people and made special connections.
Tim called me and asked me to go on the mission trip to Houston as a sponsor, and I thought I was going to Houston as in the city of Houston, but it really was more like a third world country, and it surprised me how many different nationalities were there in that little area that we were in.
And an experience I got to do on the Houston mission trip was go to different families' houses of different nationalities, such as a family from Burma who lost everything they had. I thought it was really interesting how God was using them. Like, He put them in a position right next to missionaries' houses in their apartment complex.
We had two little kids that were 6 years old, and we led them to Christ.
I saw God move when He helped us lead two little boys to the Lord.
The Spirit gave us some calmness, and they started to calm down. We actually got to talk to them, share Jesus with them.
I went on the Houston trip this year with my two kids, Hannah and Hunter. We have learned to do some sign language, and so we went to a family who is deaf. They are from Nepal, and sign language is not universal, so they did know Nepali sign language, but they've been in the States long enough to learn American sign language as well. And Hannah was really nervous that the little bit of sign language she knew was not going to be enough to communicate, and so I just encouraged her to come along and observe. And she did, and it turned out that God took her small step of faith and used it in great big ways. She was able to understand the mom very well. Here she saw a mom struggling to have any conversation with her daughter. And she had an opportunity later to meet with this little girl and teach her some sign language. And I think because Hannah was her peer, she was willing to receive that from her as opposed to her mom saying, "You really need to learn to communicate with me."
One instance where I really saw God move was one night when our little group was at an apartment complex across from where we were staying at, and we just prayed, asked the Holy Spirit to give us a number or an apartment or some kind of sign. And I was with Alan, and he got a number and a color, and then I saw a guy in a white t-shirt, and sure enough, a little later, we went to that number of apartment, and like the door frame was painted that color, and the guy that opened up was wearing a white t-shirt, and it was just crazy in hindsight, like how that all came together and how we saw God move.
It stressed me a lot, but hearing God's voice, and that was something we really focused on with kind of filling ourselves with the Holy Spirit, and I got some frustration from that, but throughout the week just being patient and just being with the whole team and the encouragement and having time to ourselves, it was amazing to hear God's voice and to see God work through the junior hires too, with visions and pictures and stuff like that.
I remember there was one day that we got to just go spend some quiet time listening to God's voice and trying to hear anything that He had to say to us. It was a challenge because it's hard to do something stay so quiet and so still and just listen when we live in such a busy world. But they heard things, they heard God speak to them, and I think that's forever going to change their lives.
I gave my life to Christ during this trip. Before I did, though, I had a lot of questions about who Christ really was and who Jesus is, and like why He really cared for us and all that. But this trip has taught me a lot, and it taught me why Jesus came down and saved us from sin.
How I will apply what I learned from Houston back at home or in Owasso is by trying to make disciples, because we were taught at Houston how to make disciples and how to have the Holy Spirit speak to us.
Being able to practice these things that we learned in Houston back here in Owasso or wherever the Lord will lead us is something that I'm excited about seeing how God will work in those ways.